All right, it's 8:40. We're ready to get started. Tonight we're going to be learning Daf Pei, Maseches Pesachim Daf Pei, entering another new 10 into the Peis. I think this is almost exactly the 2/3 mark of Maseches Pesachim. Baruch Hashem, we're making very good headway, which also, maybe it's a little scary, means we're about 40 some odd days away from Pesach. So we have our preparation cut out for us. Yesterday, we began a conversation about, we continued a conversation about what's referred to as Pesach haba b'tumah. That there are some years where the Korban Pesach is brought b'tumah because most of the people are tameh. And if most of the people are tameh, so we have this concept where tuma is permissible, b'tzibur, either hutra or dechuya. Either it's totally fine to be b'tuma that year, mutter mamish, or it's dechuya, it's b'di'evit, but we allow it. And then one of the questions that was generated by the Tanaim is what happens if you have a fixed number of people in your community? Let's say that there are 100 people, 50 of them are tameh, and 50 of them are tahor. So yesterday we quoted a machlokes between Rav and Rav Kahana, and really two versions of Rav Kahana. And with that, we were left with three different shitas in the Amoraim. And the three different shitas in the Amoraim are going to be reflected in brisas that seem to support each of those three Amoraim. And that's where we're going to start with, which is with brisas on Ayin Tes Amud Beis, a little bit more than halfway down, about 10 lines or so from the wide lines, beginning with Tanya Kavase de Rav. Each of these brisas will reflect one of the three shitas that we learned yesterday. Let's get started. Tanya Kavase de Rav. Tanya Kavase de Rav Kahana, Kitrei Lishnein. We have a brisa like the opinion of Rav, and we also have a brisa like Rav Kahana, and both versions of Rav Kahana. We'll review what those shitas were right now, so you don't have to remember them from yesterday. Tanya Kavase de Rav. Here's brisa number 1. What does brisa number 1 say? Hayu Yisrael mechza tehorin umechza temein. In our city of 50 people, of 100 people, 50 are tahor and 50 are tameh. So the halacha is, says Rav, that everybody does the Korban Pesach on Yud Dalad Nisan by Pesach proper. Halalu osin la'atzman, the people who are tahor will do their Korban, and the halalu osin la'atzman, and the people who are tameh will do their Korban, but everybody is doing the Korban on Yud Dalad Nisan. That's brisa number 1. Tanya Kilishna Kama de Rav Kahana. We also have a brisa that supports the first version of Rav Kahana. What does that brisa say? So that brisa says as follows: in our city of 100, 50 people are tahor and 50 people are tameh. So what does Rav Kahana say in his first version? Tahorin osines harishon. The people who are tahor, they do the Korban Pesach properly on Yud Dalad Nisan. However, v'tmein, they don't do it on Yud Dalad Nisan. Rather, Osines Hasheni, they push off, or I should say they're pushed off to do their Korban on Pesach Sheni. So they do it a month later, Nisan Iyar, Yud Dalet of the month of Iyar. So that's the sheet of Rav Kahana. Again, Rav says that the Tmein do it even on Yud Dalet of Nisan. And Rav Kahana version 1 says that the Tmein, the people who are Tamei, will bring their Korban on Pesach Sheni. Now here's the third brisa, V'tanya Kalishna Basra de Rav Kahana. Now here is a brisa, 4 lines from the wide lines. We're 2/3 of the way down on Ayin Tes Amud Beis. And this third brisa reflects the opinion of Rav Kahana, the second version of Rav Kahana. What does this brisa say? Hare shahayu Yisrael mechza tehorin umechza tmein. In our city of 100, 50 people are tahor and 50 people are tameh. So what does this third brisa say? Reflecting the shita of Rav Kahana number 2, Tehoren Osines Harishon, same as in all 3 cases, that the people who are Tehoren, if there are 50 people out of the 100 that are Tahor, they do their Korban on time, Yudalad Nisan. Utmein, check this out, last of the short lines, Ein Osin, Lois Harishon, Lois Hasheni. The people who are Tameh, according to Rav Kahana number 2, they don't bring a Korban Pesach that year at all. In a case of 50-50, Rav Kahana number 2 holds, there is no Korban Pesach for the Tmein. Now, the Gemara is going to ask a few questions because if you look at these 3 brisas, they're all anonymous. And usually we have an assumption that a Stam Mishnah is Rab Meir, it's somebody, but it doesn't seem to be that these are following party lines. It just seems to be that they're anonymous brisas, and seemingly all of them should be viable. But they can't all be viable because the brisas conflict with one another. So the Gemara asks the question through the lens of the Amoraim as to which brisas don't make sense. So let's get started with the questions here. This will take us until 3 lines from the bottom of the page. We're going to ask 3 good questions. Here's question number 1. L'Rav u'l'lishna basra de Rav Kahana, according to Rav, who says that the Tmein bring their korban on Yud Daled Nisan. Ulalishna Basra the Rav Kahana. And according to the second version of Rav Kahana, who holds that they don't bring a korban at all, that the Tmein are not allowed to bring a korban at all in this case, not even on Pesach Sheni, well, that will pose a problem because the middle brisa seems to disagree with that. What does the middle brisa say? Hadatana, we have a brisa, Tahora Nosen Es Harishon, Utmein Es Hasheni. We have a brisa that says that there are people who are tamei who should bring their korban on Pesach Sheni. But that doesn't work according to Rav, and it doesn't work according to Rav Kahana number 2. It only works according to Rav Kahana number 1. But if that's true, then Heichi Mitartze La, how will, Mitartze is plural, ending in the A sound with the Yud, how will they, Rav and Rav Kahana number 2, answer up the Brisa, which is our Brisa number 2 that we learned above? So says the Gemara, second wide line, there must be a nukimta going on here. What was that second brisa talking about? Where it says that Yutaka do bring the korban pesach, the tmein do bring the korban pesach on Pesach Sheni and Yud Dalet ER. Answers the Gemara, explaining the brisa, explaining Rav and how Rav and Rav Kahana would understand the brisa. All of the men were 50-50. But it wasn't all men. So let's say there were 40 men who were tamei, 10 women who were tmein, that's 50, and there were 50 who were tahor. The kasavar, so now it's 50-50, right? There's 50 who are tmein, 10 of whom are women, and 50 who are tahor, and all of whom are men. So says the Gemara, according to some Rishonim, according to some Tanaim, says the Gemara, the kasavar nashim berishon rishus, they hold that the korban pesach bismano for women is not a mitzvah doraisa. It's a rishus. They're allowed to bring it, but they're not mechuyev to bring it. So then says the Gemara, if that's true, then dal nashim itmein, when you remove the 10 women from the count because they're only a rishus, they're not mechuyavos. So then what do we have? Havel tmein miuta. Then what we end up with is that of the 100, 50 are tahor, 10 were women who are not eligible midoraisa. How many tmein are left that are men? 40. And 40 is a miut of 100. Miuta yidchul Pesach Sheni. So that second brisa is very clear. It's kaftor v'ferach. It fits perfectly to say that when you have a miut, when you have only 40 men who are tmein and 50 other men who are tahor, the halacha is that the 40 is the miut, and because the 40 is the miut, so the halacha is that they're pushed off to Pesach Sheni. That is the ukimta of brisa number 2, and explains how Rav and Rav Kahana number 2 would understand this brisa. Says the Gemara, here's our next question for us. Le Rav, who says that the tmein still bring their korban on Yud Daled Nisan. Ulalishna kama de Rav Kahana, and according to the first version of Rav Kahana, who says that they bring the korban, the tmein bring the korban on Pesach Sheni, what do they do with the third brisa? Hadatanya, the brisa writes, Tahora Nosen Es Harishon, the people who are tahor, yes, of course, they bring it on Yud Daled Nisan. What do the tmein do? What does the third brisa say? Utmein ein osin loas harishon veloas hasheni, they don't bring the korban at all. So then heichi mitartzela. How then would Rav and Rav Kahana number 1 explain the brisa that says clearly that those who are tmein don't bring a korban at all? They're not going to bring it on Pesach Rishon, and they're also not going to bring it on Pesach Sheni. So here the Gemara splits their answers. Rav and Rav Kahana will give different answers. We're about 5/6 of the way down, 4/5 of the way down. Rav mitaritz la as follows. How will Rav answer? Remember what Rav says. Rav is of the opinion that the Tahorins, that the Tmein still bring the korban Pesach, even if it's mechza mechza, they still bring it on Yud Daled Nisan. How does Rav explain the brisa that indicates that they should not bring the Pesach at all? Kigon Shahai Yisrael mechza tmein umechza tahorin. The Jewish people total 100. Half of them are tamei and half of them are tahor. The nashim odfos ala tahorin, and the women are in excess on the side of the tahor, which means that 50 there are 50 tahorin, but and most of them are men, but 10 of them are women. The kasav are nashim berishon chova, and some of the Tanaim hold that nashim, that women are obligated properly, just like men. It's not a mitzvah saseh shezman grama in a halachic way. Women often whatever the halachic jargon is to get them to be obligated. But this Tana holds that women are obligated b'chova to bring the korban pesach only on Pesach Rishon uvesheni rishus. Therefore, berishon lo avde to have a lemute. The reason why they don't show up, why they're not obligated in the beginning, is because they're a mute. Umiuta, lo avde b'rishon. And when there's a miyut, they don't bring in the first place. The tmein are less, so they're a smaller group. Uvesheni lo avde, and in the Pesach Sheni they don't bring at all because dal nashim minayhu avavlu palga. Upalga lo avde b'sheni, because women are not obligated in a Pesach Sheni, so therefore the numbers don't work in their favor. Now it's 50-50 mamish, and because it's 50-50, 50-50 is not brought b'sheni. So that's how we could have a scenario whereby, according to both Rav and Rav Kahana, number one, how the third brisa that we learn makes sense. It makes sense in a case where there are women who are involved in the count, where we would say that women are obligated, according to this approach, women are obligated in the Korban Pesach only if it's done b'Pesach Rishon, but not if it's done b'Pesach Sheni. Very good. Next answer, how would we, remember we're asking now against Rav Kahana number one. Rav Kahana number one was of the opinion that people who are tameh and who are b'mechza al mechza, if there's 50 people in a city who are tameh and 50 who are tahor, so Rav Kahana number one was of the opinion that they bring, the tameh people bring their korban on Pesach Sheni. So says the Gemara, how does Rav Kahana explain the brisa that says that they don't bring it at all? Well, the Rav Kahana, 10, 12 lines from the bottom, Ayin Testament Beis, Rav Kahana, Damar Palga Nami Avde B'Sheni. According to those who say, Rav Kahana, who says that if it's Palga Upalga, they do bring on Pesach Sheni. That was a machlokas between Rav and Rav Kahana. Hachim. This is how Rav Kahana would understand the brisa that indicates that those who are tamei don't bring a korban at all, not Pesach Rishon and not Pesach Sheni. What does Rav Kahana say? Kigon, what's the ukimta of the third brisa which says that they don't bring it at all? Kigon Shahai Yisrael mechza tehorin umechza tmein. It's 100 people in the city, 50-50. The nashim ashlimos letahoros. The women are part of the count of the 50 who are tahor. Because savar nashim berishon chova v'sheni rishus, and he holds that if women are going to be considered a chova for the korban pesach, that's only true b'yom tov rishon, b'pesach rishon, excuse me, but b'pesach sheni, it's only a rishus. There, women are not obligated to bring the korban pesach. B'rishon, and according to Rav Kahana, here's how we'd understand this final brisa. B'rishon lo avde dehavalu upalga upalga b'rishon lo avde. According to the first explanation, is that if women are part of the chova, then it's palga upalga, even though they're part of the count, but they're a chova, so it's 50-50, 10 of them may be women, but the numbers are going to hold up. It's still going to be palga upalga. But when there's a case of chiyuv, it's palga upalga, we would say palga b'rishon lo avde. That's not appropriate. That we should, it's not. They should not bring in the ratio according to Rav Kahana. They should not bring in the on Yud Dal Nisan. B'sheni nami lo avde, because since then dal nashim minay min hatahorim, we remove women from the count by Pesach Sheni, because women are only, according to all Tanoim seemingly, women are not obligated in Pesach Sheni. So therefore havalu tmei and ruba. And if you remove the women from the count of the tahorim, so then the Tamein are going to be the rov. If you take 10 people away from the 50 tahor, then you have only 40 tahor and 50 Tamein, and then that's the rov. The ruba lo avde b'sheni, and we never have the people who are the rov to bring the korban as a Pesach Sheni. And that's how we answered question number 2. Here's the third question, last of the middle, with lines 4 or 5 lines from the bottom. Ula Rav Kahana, according to Rav Kahana, both versions of Rav Kahana, how will Rav Kahana understand the first brisa that we learned that reflected the shita of Rav? The first brisa that we learned indicated that both those who are tahorin and both those who are tamein, in the case of mechza al mechza, both of them bring their korbanos on Yod Dal Nisan. So how does Rav Kahana deal with that? Hadatanya, the brisa writes, Harei shahai Yisrael mechza tahorin umechza tamein. The brisa writes that if there are 50 people who are tahor and 50 who are tameh, so what did Rav say? What does the brisa say that Rav is leaning upon? 4 lines from the bottom, halalu osin la'asman v'halalu osin la'asman. It's a perfect match. Everybody brings their own. The tahor people, the 50 tahor bring their korban pesach on Yud Daled Nisan. A few minutes later, the 50 Tmein bring it. Everybody wins. How does Rav Kahana get out of this? Heichim Mitaritzla. What would he do? Because neither of Rav Kahana's shitas agreed with that. Rav Kahana, number 1, said that the Tmein bring on Pesach Sheni. This brisa says you bring Yud Daled Nisan on Pesach Rishon. And then the second version of Rav Kahana says that the Tmein don't bring it at all, not on Pesach Rishon or Pesach Sheni. So that for sure doesn't fit. Answers the Gemara, and with this we'll almost end this part of the sugya. Amar lach Rav Kahana, you're right. You're absolutely right. That brisa, I can't answer you. Really, there's a machlokes tanoim here. Tanoihi. What's the machlokes tanoim? Ika lamanda amar mechza al mechza kirov. That's basically the camp of Rav. In Rav's camp, we hold that mechza al mechza is kirov. Each one is treated like a rov. And therefore, like the first brisa taught us about Rav, although it was before Rav. What the first brisa taught us is that if each side is treated like the rove, then the people who are tahor bring their korban on Yud Dalet, and right afterwards the Tmein bring their korban, no problem, because each one's treated like the rove. But according to the camp of Rav Kahana, he's of the opinion that no, when it's 50-50, each side is not viewed like a rove. Each side is viewed either like a half or like a minority, but certainly not like a rove. And that is how Rav Kahana gets out of it. So up until now, up until this final line, we've been of the assumption that all of the brisas can intersect perfectly with no machlokes. We explained ukimtas here and there. There's women in the count. There are women not in the count. There are women above the count, included in the count. Sometimes they're chova, sometimes they're rishus. So with all of those factors that we just learned, so that's how the Gemara makes it all work out. However, this answer of Rav Kahana interjects a fundamental machlokes in the Tanaim about whether or not we would say that mechza al mechza is treated like a rove, or if mechza al mechza, if there are 100 people and 50 are tar, 50 are tamei, if they're not treated like a rove. Gufa, we learned in the first brisa that was explaining to us that Rav used as his primary text. What did we see there? We saw the following line. We saw Harei Shahi Yisrael Mechza Tahor Nu Mechza Tmein 50-50. Halal Osan La'atman Valal Osan La'atman. The Brisa says, and Rav quoted afterwards, that everybody brings their korban, both the Tahor and the Tmein, on Yud Daled Nisan. Now, what was missing from that Brisa of Rav, the first Brisa that we saw in the middle of the page, the one where it said Tanya Kavase de Rav, about halfway down on the page, what we were missing was the rest of that brisa. And here the Gemara presents the rest of the brisa, and then Rav is going to make a comment on this one that is, this whole conversation, it just adds a whole new level of nuance. So here we go. What's the rest of the brisa? 2 lines from the bottom, I intest, and base hayutmein odfin ala tahorin. If there were more people who were tamei, so let's say 60-40. Let's not say 60-40. Afilu echad, 51-49. It's not even true. It's even if it's just off by 1, it's 51-50. If there were 101 people in the city and 51 people were tamei, afilu echad, and 50 were tahor, the halacha is yasu betuma. That would be a Pesach, where it's Pesach haba betuma, where it would be okay. We would have a more relaxed set of guidelines in regards to tuma. Why? Lefi she'ein korban tzibur chaluk. This principle we're going to see a few times today. We don't like when there's a korban tzibur that's chaluk, that's split among the people. It's a very close call, granted. And when we have the opportunity to tip the scales, even if tipping the scales means that it's going to be a Pesach haba betuma, as long as the Jews are unified, what powerful hashkafa idea woven right here into the halachos of korban Pesach. We'd rather all the Jews bring the korban Pesach babetuma than have 50 people bring it betara and 51 people bring it betuma. No, that is considered Pesach babetuma. That is the shita of the Tanakama, and the Tanakama holds that if it's 51-50, tamei to tahor, it's Pesach haba betuma. Rabbi Lazar ben Masya Omer, I don't agree with the Tanakama. In hayachid machriyas atzibur latuma. One person, if it's 51 tamei to 50 tahor, that's insufficient. That does not tip the scales. Rabbi Lazar ben Masya holds that's not considered a case of Pesach haba betuma, and he quotes a pasuk to prove his point. Why? As we turn to the top of Pei Amud Aleph, because the Gemara says, Lo suchal lizboach es haPesach be'achad she'arecha. And he makes a diuk on the word echad. Take a look at Rashi. Top Rashi on the page, Dibur HaMaskeh, Lo suchal lizboach es haPesach be'achad, bishvil yachid, lo sizbechenu she'yehei oso hayachid goremu moel b'shchitas o shum tzad natiyah. The one person's not enough. We need a bigger gap than one. So that's the shita of Rabbi Lazar ben Masya. Continues the Gemara. Reb Shimon Omer, check this out. Afilu shevet echad tamei ushar kol hashvatim tehorin. Yeah, 12 shvatim. One of them had to go to a funeral, and everyone's tamei. Everyone's tamei meis. So, but all the other 11 shvatim are tehorin. This is not 51 people and 50. There's millions of people on one side of the fence, and one shevet that's tamei. What's the din? Says the Brisa, halalu osen la'atzman v'halalu osen la'atzman. Wow. The Tahorin bring their korban on Yudalid, and then immediately afterwards, the one shevet that's tamei also brings it. We treat it like the mechza al mechza of Rav. It says the Gemara, 4 lines down, my time of Reb Shimon. Why does Reb Shimon hold that way? Because, and here we get into the lumdas. This is a real lumdish idea. Kasavar, shevet echad ikri kahal. The reason why is because Kol Kahal Adas Yisrael, this is a Kahal too. When they're in the form of a Shevet, The Shvatim have a halachic aspect to them in that any one Shevet is a kahal, it's a kehila. And therefore, there's one Shevet which is a kahal. The other Shvatim are also considered kahal. It's as if it's 50-50 on the scales. That's how Rabbi Shimon looks at it. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, afilu Shevet echad tamei ushar kol hashvatim tehorim. They're not 50-50. No way. Yasu betuma. The opposite. One of the 12 Shvatim is tamei. 11 of them are tehorin. What's the din? A wild chumrah. It's Pesach haba betuma. We treat everyone as though they're tamei. It's only 1/12. It's literally 8% of the Jewish people. But we say Pesach haba betuma according to this sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Again, the achdus. She'ein korban tzibur chaluk. We don't want the Jewish people to be in different groupings. We'd rather take 90+% of Klal Yisrael who are all Tahorin and have them be Pesach haba betuma, have them bring this year to bring it with the more relaxed guidelines of Pesach haba betuma than we would to have those 90% bring it b'tahara, but to be chaluk, to have the separate distinctions in Klal Yisrael of the 90% that are Tahorim, the 11 Shvatim are all Tahor, and there's the one that's Tameh. Wow, huge sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda Savar Shevet Echad Ikri Kahal Tahavalu Palga Upalga. He says, yeah, we do treat them like 50-50, so it's not exactly like I said, but here's the nuance, here's the twist. The Ein Korban Tzibur Chalak V'Avdei Kula B'Tuma. So he actually has a little bit of a mix going on. Yes, it's true. When there's one Shevet that's Tameh and 11 that are Tahor, we treat that as Palga Upalga. But there's another factor that tips the scales, and that is that a Korban Tzibur cannot be Chalak. We cannot have the distinctions, and therefore everyone is Babatuma. The only way to get them all to be together, since one element of the Kahal is considered to be Tameh, is to have them all bring the Pesach HaBabatuma. Itmar, the Amoraim discussed 12 lines down, approximately. Peyam et Aleph says the Gemara, Hay Yisrael mechza taharnu mechza tmein. We've had this case before, but now, unlike earlier, where Rav said that if it's 50 people in town who are tahor and 50 who are tameh, that everyone should bring it on Yudal. That he says before we get to that decision, we need to tip the scales. Same line of reasoning that we just saw in this brisa. Amar Rav, mitamin echad mehen b'sheretz. Go find me a volunteer. I'm going to make him Tameh B'Sheretz. Why? Because then we're going to tip the scales to say Pesach haba betuma. We don't want Mechza Umechza. Yeah, we've debated about it over the last blot. Daf Ayin Tes is all about Mechza Umechza. Yeah, that's what we would do if Tachlis it was 50-50. But we avoid it wherever we can. I'm going to make you Tameh Tumas Sheretz so that we have a case of Tameh Pesach haba betuma. Ve'amai. Why? Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Let the Tahorin bring their korban and let the Tmein bring their korban, just like you said a blot ago, Rav. Why would you say that? The Amar Rav, you yourself, from your own mouth. Halalu osen la'asman v'halalu osen la'asman. What is Rav trying to do? Why is it that if it's 50-50, that he takes a sheretz and he touches some guy, 51, we make you tameh, it's Pesach. Why? Amre hacha b'maya skin, and what are we dealing with here? Kigon shahayu tmein odfin ala tahorin echad. Strange answer. It's 51-50. Says Gemara. Then why would you be metame someone with a sheretz? If it's true that it's 51-50, then you already have your robe. We don't need the sheretz. If you're telling me the ukimtas that it's 51-50, go put your sheretz away. Everything's fine. It's Pesach haba betuma. You got what you wanted without even trying. Says the Gemara, well, no. Maybe Savar la Rabbi Eliezer ben Masya da'amar ein hayachid machriyas hatzibur l'tuma. Maybe 51-50 is really nechzal nechza. But if 51-50 is really nechzal nechza because you hold like Rabbi Eliezer ben Masya, then ihachi hadar kushyan l'duchte. Question falls right back. Rav, what are you doing with the sheret? Why are you trying to tip the scales? Ne'avdu hani l'chudayu vani l'chudayu. Still, the whole thing doesn't make any sense. We're basically back to our question against Rav. If there are 50 people who are tameh and 50 people who are tahor, you're going to walk over to one guy and touch him with a sheret. Why would you do that? Answers the Gemara, answer number one. Elahachi kamar. Almost halfway down, payam et aleph. Here is why Rav would say we need to tip the scales. If If in fact we have that sheet in the Tanaim that holds that if there are 50 people who are Tameh and 50 who are Tahor, that's not considered to be Pesach Haba B'Tumah. And if you say B'Tseiruf to that, in addition, V'Savar Lak Rabbi Yehuda, Damar Ein Korban Tzibur Chaluk, that we're not allowed, we don't want Klal Yisrael to be split up. We don't want half being Tahor and half being Tameh. Then under those circumstances, with those two shitas combined, Mitamin Echad Man B'Sheretz. He says, because, let me just put it in another frame. This principle of Ein, just lost line, of Ein Korban Tzibur Chaluk, it's not some feel-good type of halacha. It's a din. It's a din. We don't let it stand in a place where we could solve the problem. Go get a sheretz and make somebody tamei. It'll be Pesach Haba B'Tumah. We'll tip the scales. That was the answer of Rav. Now let's see the answer of Ula. The Ula Amar, I have a better solution than that. Don't touch him with a sheretz. Send him out of town. Send him on vacation. One-way ticket. Come back later at another point. The Ula Amar, Mishalcheno Echad Mehen L'derech Rechoka. Send the guy out of town. Why? Why didn't you like Rav's answer? V'tamenu b'sheretz. What do you care? Tuma is tuma. Rachok is rachok. He's unavailable. Whatever you're doing, you're making it so that it's going to be Pesach Haba B'Tumah. Whatever it is, just send the guy out of town. Why can't you say sheretz? Says the Gemara, we can't, because Ula had a kula. What did Ula hold? Kasavar shochtin v'zorkin al tmei sheretz. He held that you can still bring the sheretz won't help you. You walk over to someone with one of the Shmona Shratzim and you throw it at them and they become tamei. Doesn't change anything, because you're allowed to bring a korban pesach when you're tamei b'tumah sheretz. So that doesn't work. So then says the Gemara, why doesn't Ula recommend something else? V'tam enu b'meis. Maybe send him to the funeral. Have him touch a mace. You're going to tell him he's got to be part of the Chevra Kadisha today, and somebody passed away, Rahman al-Litzlan. We're going to make him tamei mace. Why doesn't Ula recommend that? Well, because, says Ula, if you do that, then madchehu ata michagigaso. If you do that, then he's going to miss out on his korban chagiga. Yeah, he's going to miss out on his korban chagiga. That's true. But ashtenami madchehu atami pischo. If you make him tamei on the korban pesach, if you make him tamei for the korban chagiga, then he can't bring the korban pesach. You're trading korbanos at this point. Why would you do that? Says the Gemara, well, Efshar, the Korban Pesach, David B'Sheni. I'd rather him miss out on his Chagiga than on the Korban Pesach, because the Korban Pesach you could bring on Yudalit of Iyar, bring it the next month. So says the Gemara, the mace nami. I could come up with a circumstance too, where even if it was a tumas mace, where you could still bring the Korban Chagiga. How would that work out? Efshar David B'Shvi, Dahavale Shmini Shalom. If he only has to wait 7 days, he becomes Tamei on Erev Pesach. So count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sprinkle the mechatas. He'll be fine by day 7. Bring it. That'll be the 8th day of Yontif. He can bring his korban chagiga yotze. Says the Gemara, no. Stop with all the shaklavataria. Here is what Ula really holds. Kasavar Ula kulu tashlumin derishoninhu. Really, all of the korbanos chagiga have to do with tashlumin. The chazi berishon, chazi bekulu. You can't ruin day number 1 of the chagiga by making him tamei mace, because he has to be chazi on the first day to bring the korban chagiga. The chol hecha de lo chazi berishon, lo chazi bekulu. And that's how Rav and Ula argue in regards to tipping the scales. They agree that you should tip the scales to make it Pesach Haba B'Tumah, so that it's not a korban chaluk, that we don't have 2 different groups in Klal Yisrael. Half of them are Tahor, half of them are Tamei. We know we want to solve that problem. Rav says it's sufficient with Tumas Sheretz, but because Ula allows for someone who's Tamei with Tumas Sheretz to bring the Korban Pesach, we need another way to solve the problem. So therefore Ula says, send him out of town, send him a Derech Rechoka. No Tumas Mace, that doesn't work out, because we need him to be shaykh, at least in principle. We need him to be shaykh for the Korban Chagig on day 1. Amar Lu Rav Nachman, I hate to be so practical. Who are you getting to go out of town? Who wants to volunteer to not bring the Korban Pesach this year? Amar Lu Rav Nachman, Zilu va'amr leil Ula, somebody go tell Ula the following. Man Sayis, who's going to listen to you? De'akar Sicha is going to uproot his tent, u'meshachneha b'rayit, and his family, goodbye, I'm out. I see you guys later. I'll be the Baal Chesed. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. And in short, this rhetorical comment of Rav Nachman means that he holds like Rav, that if it were to be the case that there were 100 people in the city, 50 of them Tar, 50 of them Tamei, were Matame, 1 person B'Sheretz. Oh, crazy answer. Okay, good. Itmar, let's continue. We're about 3/4 of the way down, about 5 lines or so from the Y lines. Amar Itmar, Hayu Ruban Zavin. If most of Klal, that's a remarkable thing. If most of the tzibur, if there are 100 people, so let's say that 60 of them are Zavin, Umiyut and Tmei Mason, 40 of them are tamei meis. A zav is not allowed to bring the korban pesach, but a tamei meis is. A zav is not allowed. So Amar Rav, osan tmei mesin. The 40 people in this community who are tamei meis, ein an osan lo v'rishon v'lo v'sheni. They don't bring the korban at all. Why not? Why do these tmei mesin not bring the korban at all? Because the rishon lo avde dehavu miyuta. Because there are only 40 out of the 100. There's no miyut that brings the korban on day one. That's not appropriate. Umiyuta lo avde b'rishon. And b'sheni nami lo avde, because kol heicha de avde tzibor b'rishon avid yachi b'sheni. When there is a tzibor to do the korban on Yudalid Nisan, then we allow the yachid to bring b'sheni. But here, kol heicha de lo avde tzibor b'rishon, no korban was brought on Yudalid, because in this Klal Yisrael year, 60 of them were Zavin. They were not allowed to bring the korban, so no one brought it. So if there's no robe to bring it on Yudalid Nisan, there's no Pesach Sheni for the Tmei Mesim, the 40 of them to bring it on Pesach Sheni. It's not going to happen this year. Amar Lahu Shmuel. Shmuel says to Rab, Zilu Amrule. He says to his Talmidim, go to the other base measures. Go tell Abba. Go tell the Abba. Say to Rab, that's his nickname. What about the pasuk? B'yasu b'nei Yisrael ta Pesach b'moadom. My avadisle. Who's going to bring the korban Pesach this year? There's no one to bring it. Says the Gemara. Amar Lahu. Rav says back to the Talmidim who were there. He sent an entourage and he says back to them, Zilu Amrule. Go back to Shmuel and tell him, Ki havu kul hu zavin my avadisle. My hands are tied behind my back. Everyone's a zav. Not allowed to bring the korban pesach. It's just what it is. Onis rachmana patre. There's nothing I could do. So that's what he says is the case. My advice: There's nothing I can do. These people are all zavin. What that's like. That's the way things are. That's the way the cookie crumbles. There's nothing going to happen here. So that's the case of Ruban zavin and miut tmei mesim. Let's see another iterations. 5-6 lines from the bottom. Itmar hayu Ruban tmei mesim. If most people were tamei meis, that's the classic parameters of Pesach Haba B'Tumah. You have most people who are tamei meis. Umiyutan zavin, 60 people are tamei meis. 40 people are zavin. Rav Huna Amar ein tashlum in the Pesach Haba B'Tumah. The zavin ein tashlum in the Pesach Haba B'Tumah. If we're in a category of, this is such an important idea. Once we trigger Pesach Haba B'Tumah, there's no Pesach Sheni. There's no tashlum, and you cannot make up the korban. The Ravad Bar Ava Amar yesh tashlum in the Pesach Haba B'Tumah. It's not true. We can solve that problem at a later point. Name of maybe Rav Huna and Ravad Bar Ava, who argue about tashlumin by Pesach Haba B'Tumah. Maybe they're really arguing about something that we've already seen before. What might they be arguing about? Name of 4 lines from the bottom. According to Rav Huna, who says that when it's a year that's Pesach Haba B'Tumah, there's no tashlumin, you can't make it up in Pesach Sheni. Kasavar, why is it that that's true? Because Tuma dechuyehi b'tzibor. Really, we don't want to be lenient. We need to be, because everybody's tmei mesim. Fine, Nebuch, it's Pesach Haba B'Tumah. It's not hutra. It's dechuya. It's b'di'eved. And that's why we don't allow for tashlumin. Masha'en kain, 2 lines from the bottom. Umandamar yesh tashlumin the Pesach Haba B'Tumah. According to Rabbi Bar Ava, who holds that there is tashlumin for Pesach Haba B'Tumah, kasavar, maybe the reason why he allows the tashlumin is because Tuma hutra b'tzibur. That when we say Pesach Haba B'Tumah, it's mamish a heter. It's totally fine. Green light. Do as you need. Says the Gemara, Amrei lo. No, that's not true. We've already seen this. We said the other day that this was true. We don't hold of Tuma hutra b'tzibur. It's not a blanket, carte blanche, everything is fine. It's dechuya, it's not ideal. Dekulei alma tuma dechuya b'tzibur. Uvahaka miflage. Really, the machlokes about tashlumin between Rav Huna and Rav Bar Ava is about something else. Mar savar, as we turn to the top of Peyamid Beis. Tahara medachya, tumalo medachya, that when it comes to a Pesach that's b'tahara, then we have medachya, then we allow for people to push off. That's okay. Take a look at Rashi. Tahara medachya, tuma l'sheni, ki abde tzibur b'tahara. If you have people who brought the korban on Yudal Nisan, then we allow for a dichui for Pesach Sheni. But tuma lo medachya, that's the Tanakama, that's the Shita of Rav Huna. Umar Savar Afilu Tuma Nami Medachya, and the Shita of Rav Bar Ava is that even if there's going to be a year of Pesach Haba B'Tumah, they're simply arguing about a narrow din. It's myopic. They're only arguing about whether or not there is Pesach Sheni when it's Pesach Haba B'Tumah. Next case, 2 lines from the top. Second line. Daf Peyamid Beis, we're going to be going about 2/3 of the way down. Umar Sava, that's not where we are. 2 lines down. Itmar Hayu Shlishisan Zavin. 1/3 of the tzibur, 33 people. Let's assume there are 99 this time. Math works better. 33 people are zavin. Ushlishisan tahorin. 33 people are perfectly tahor. Ushlishisan tamei mesim. And 1/3 are tamei mes. Says Rav Mani Amar Rav Mani Bar Patish, Osan Tmei Mason, Einan Osan Loas Arishan Veloas Asheni, nothing doing for them. Those who are Tamei Mace, the 33 people who are Tamei Mace out of the 99, they will not end up bringing a Korban Pesach this year. Birishon Lo Avde, because Higdilu Zavan Al Tahorin de Lo Avde Betuma. They're not allowed to bring because the Tmei Mason are in the minority. Havale Tmei Mason Miyuta, Miyuta Lavde Birishon. They're the smallest crowd. And the other people are going to be in the majority. So the Tmei Mesim are not allowed to bring. And B'Sheni Lo Avde, and with this it'll take us to the Mishnah. B'Sheni Lo Avde, Nitzrifu Zavim Tmei Mesim. Now on the other side, the Zavim, they are Tamei and never eligible for Korban. And they're mitzdarif to the Tmei Mesim who are currently Tamei and haven't brought yet. And now they're the Rov. To Lo Avde Barishon, the people who were Tamei Mace and the Zavin who did not bring in the first days, now there's 66 people to have a Ruba. For Ruba Lo Madchu Le Pesach Sheni. So that's what happens when the community is split into thirds, a third Zav, a third Tahor, and a third Tamei Mace. Next, Mishnah, Baruch Hashem, we're getting there. This parak has just a couple of blot left. I think we'll be done maybe Shabbos, maybe Sunday. Oh wow, early next week. Just kidding. Let's continue. HaPesach. Shenizrak damo. Let's say the Korban Pesach. You're the Kohen, and you just did the Zrika for a particular Chabura's Korban Pesach. Then what do you find out? You find out that the basar in fact is tamei. What do? Nevach. Says the Gemara, hatzitz miratze, that the tzitz of the Kohen Gadol has the power to rectify the situation. Gzeras hakasu, of the power of the tzitz, and therefore afal pi, that the zrika was done on meat that we found out that was actually basar that was nitma at the time of the zrika. Afal pikein, it doesn't make a difference. The din is that is considered hurtza. You were yotze the din. However, nitma aguf of the bailim. Let's say that the people became tamei. Eina tzitz miratze. The tzitz doesn't function on people. The tzitz functions on korbanos. So eina tzitz miratze mibnei sha'amru, because as we've learned already once or twice, but here's the actual marim makom in a mishnah. Hanazir ve'oseh pesach hatzitz miratze al tumas hadam ve'eina tzitz miratze al tumas haguf. It only applies to animals, not to people. Nitma tumas hatehom. This is an idea we'll speak about tomorrow. Tumas hatehom is a type of suffix tuma. Hatzitz miratze, the tzitz would help with that. But let's analyze the first part of this Gemara just for today, and then we'll wrap up in just a few minutes. Opens the Gemara 1/3 of the way down, Daf Pei Amud Beis. The Gemara makes a diuk. We said in the Reisha of our Mishnah that if the Korban Pesach had Zrikas Hadam, and only afterwards we found out that it was Tamei, that the tzitz helps. So the Gemara makes a diuk. Taima, the Nizrak ve'achar kach noda. The reason why the tzitz is meratze in such a case is because you already did the Zrikas Hadam, and then you found out afterwards that the meat was problematic. Aval noda, but let's say you first found out that the meat was problematic. The achar kach nizrak, and then you still did the zrika with knowledge that the basar was problematic. Maybe we'd say lo meratze. Maybe we would, that's our diuk from the Gemara, from the Mishnah. The Mishnah seems to imply that your knowledge is the gorein. It's not the mitzias of what the animal is, because in retrospect, we know the animal was problematic, but your knowledge of it seems to make a difference. That if you knew about it, then the tzitz won't help you. And if you didn't know about it, the tzitz seems to help you. Uraminu, but that doesn't fit with the following brisa. Al mahatzitz meratze. How powerful is the tzitz? Where is its efficacy? Says the Gemara, Al adam v'ala basar v'ala chelev shenitma. It applies to blood. It applies to meat. Bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezi, bein b'ones, bein b'ratzon, bein b'yachid, bein b'tzibor. Seems to be it's extremely powerful. And it doesn't seem to be that your knowledge makes a difference. Yet the diuk of the Gemara was against the Mishnah that your knowledge does make a difference. We don't see that distinction here. Seems to be that the tzitz should work no matter what. We'll see two answers and then we'll stop. Amar Ravina, almost halfway down, Pei Amud Beis. Ravina says, Tumaso, bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid hurtza. If it became tamei, when the brisa says bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, that the tzitz helps, that's if the tuma was bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid. That's when it's going to be hurtza. That's what the brisa was. What was our Mishnah talking about? The zrika was b'shogeg, then hurtza, but b'mezid lo hurtza. When the brisa was talking about bein b'shogeg, bein b'mezid, bein b'ones, bein b'ratzon, bein b'yachid, bein b'tzibur, all of the beins, the tzitz is maratze everywhere. That's true in regards to how the animal became tameh. But as it relates to the zrika, that's not what that brisa is talking about. When it relates to the zrika is only good if you didn't know that it was tameh, if you were b'shogeg. But if you did it b'mezid, lo hurtza. That's the answer of Ravina, that the brisa was only talking about how the animal became tameh, and it was not referencing the zrika directly. Rav Shila says, you've all got it all wrong. The diuk of the Mishnah was not real. Leave it alone. The language of the Mishnah was not meant to be medayik from. Let me tell you the din, and let me explain to you why the diuk was there. Says Rav Shila as follows. Rav Shila Amar Zrika, so in regards to the Zrika too, Bein B'shogeg, Bein B'mezid, Hurtza. In regards to the Tuma, I disagree with Ravina as well. In regards to Tuma, B'shogeg Hurtza, that if it became Tameh B'shogeg, then the tzitz will help. It's Hurtza. It's going to be a wonderful korban. B'mezid, if it became Tameh on purpose, low Hurtza would not be okay. What about the fact that the Brisa Elahadikatani Bein B'shogeg Bein B'mezid? Well, you tried to use it over here for Tuma, but our Mishnah says it's for everything. Look back at that, not our Mishnah, the Brisa. The Brisa, which read Uraminhu 2 lines into the Gemara, said that it's on everything. Dam, Basar, Chelev, Shenitma, doesn't make on everything. So how do we understand that Brisa? Says Rav Shila Hachi Kamar. This is pshat in the Brisa. Nitma b'shogeg, if it became Tameh b'shogeg, then the Zarku bein b'shogeg bein b'mezid, and your Zrika was either shogeg or mezid, then hurtza. That's how we understand the Brisa. What about the diuk? What about the diuk that the Gemara opened with? The diuk the Gemara opened with sounded perfect. Look at the language of our Mishnah. The Mishnah opened that if the Pesach was nizrak damo, the achar kach no deshu tameh, then it's meratze. Perfect. But that implies that if you knew, that is the implication. It's a very clear implication. That if you knew about it, then it would not be meratze. So it says the Gemara, and therefore the Gemara made the diuk of taima. The reason why we said that tzitz was helpful was the nizrak v'achar kach noda, because you didn't know about it. Aval noda, but if you knew about it, the achar kach nizrak, and then you did the zrika sadam lo, there should be no hurtza. That's not where the tzitz should be helpful. You did the zrika b'mezid. What about that diuk? So says Rav Shila, no, hu adin. It is in fact the case that your diuk is wrong. That even if you did it intentionally, it's going to work. That's not the problem. So if that's true, why then did the Mishnah use the language to be medayik from? Why didn't you say that if the meat became tameh, forget about when you learned about it? Who cares when you learned about it? Rav Shila says no matter what, it's going to be hortza. The tzitz will help in that case. So it says the Gemara, it was only there for structural purposes. Nishum de'bay lemisna seifa, because the end of our Mishnah that we just learned at the top of this page says nitma haguf eina tzitz meratze. So we wanted to be poetic. Te'afilu nizrak ve'achar kach v'noda lo. Even though it's true that it's that in that case that afilu nizrak ve'achar kach noda lo, that there's not going to be hortza. Tani Reisha Nami Nizrak V'achar Kach Noda, just to match in language. So we said the language of V'achar Kach Noda, but it was not meant to make a diuk from. It was only meant to make the Mishnah structurally sound. We're going to stop right here at the 2 dots. Nitma Tumas Hatehom. We'll pick up here tomorrow, Mirza Hashem, with Daf Pei Aleph. Wishing you all a beautiful night.